Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. Class is being recorded. Recording will be shared on YouTube as always. End of semester is approaching at a very scary pace. We have got 2 more units to do. Transportation of dangerous goods, which is a fairly long and detailed unit. I've allocated 2 weeks, so 2 lectures on that. And then abnormal loads. Abnormal loads is very, very brief. I don't normally pay too much or spend too much time on that. Let me upload my slides. Thumbs up quickly. Just confirm to me that you can see the slideshow.
Yes, Miss, we can see it.
Thank you, Ms. Nampala. Just before I start, I can quickly mention I have started marking your tests. Results so far, I'm pleased. It's not looking too bad at all. It seems you did listen to me when I said pay attention to your assignment and pay attention to the activities in the flip book, the complete study guide. So you listen to me there, and obviously your results will reflect you having listened to me. Results will be released just after the weekend. I will also try my best to have your assignment results released after the weekend. Then there's one more quiz scheduled, and I will, for the students who after all the results have been released have not yet qualified for the exam. Remember, you need, in terms of the curriculum document, you need a 50% semester mark to qualify for the exam. I will set a makeup test opportunity. The makeup test will be online, but it will not be a quiz. It will be online, but it will be a test where you have to type your answers. Don't start thinking, oh, but that's unfair. Everybody is going to get such good marks for that. You will, if you have already qualified for the exam, you will not be permitted to write that test. That test will replace your face-to-face test mark. It does not replace a missed quiz. If you missed quiz 1, that is your own bad luck. If you didn't submit your assignment, that is your own bad planning. It will replace the face-to-face test, strictly the face-to-face test mark. It is not a quiz. Normally, students do not do this that well in this type of test. So don't think, oh, it's an easy way out. Having said that, let's start with dangerous goods. Transportation of dangerous goods. Lots of learning outcomes. Make sure you can address all these learning outcomes. In your assignment, there was a question based on the transportation of dangerous goods. Obviously, the question that you'll be getting in this exam will not be identical to this, but the manner in which I assess dangerous goods in the test, in the assignment, sorry, sort of a case study with a whole lot of short questions based on the case study. That is typical of how I assess at least dangerous goods. So you can be expecting something similar to that in the exam. After I've marked all the assignments, once those marks are released, the memorandum will be attached at the end of, right at the bottom of your marked assignment, so you'll also have access to that memorandum. So first of all then, we're studying the transportation of dangerous goods. So of course, the first thing you need to know is, what are dangerous goods? What am I talking about? Dangerous goods, items or substances which, if not handled or packed properly, can pose a substantial risk to health, safety, property, or the environment. Dangerous goods are also sometimes referred to as hazardous goods. If you Google and you go to American sites, you will see that they use the terminology hazmat. Please do not use hazmat in any of my assessments. I will penalize you. Also, do not abbreviate dangerous goods. Students sometimes abbreviate dangerous goods to DG. DG is not an abbreviation for dangerous goods. DG is an abbreviation for Director General. So, dangerous goods, write out the words. Also make sure you actually spell the word correctly. Students sometimes put an E after the S, which makes it dangerous. We're not French. We don't talk about dangerous. But yes, I won't penalize you for spelling. I will penalize you if you use the terminology hazmat. This is not hazmat. So, items of substances which, if not handled or packed correctly, can pose a substantial risk to health, safety, property, or the environment. These include gases, liquids, and solid substances that can have corrosive, explosive, toxic, radioactive, or infectious or flammable properties. So think for a second. Raise your hand or even just shout out. Have you recently seen dangerous goods being transported? See it around town quite often. One particular instance, example of dangerous goods. Can you think of something quickly? Tell me. Come on.
Ma'am, of recently I saw a petrol tank being transported to Rund.
Absolutely.
That's
Thank you, Mr.
dangerous.
Kambinda. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Kambinda. That is probably the most common example of the transportation of dangerous goods that you will see on your daily doings, traveling either in Windhoek or around Namibia, is fuel tankers. These vehicles that transport petrol and diesel and that type of thing. You see them often. Next time you see one of them, have a good look at it, at all the signs. They're known as placards. We will study placards still. The signs that are pasted on them. Have a look so that you can identify in real life what I'm talking about, what I'm teaching you in class. Thank you, Mr. Kambinda. Petrol tankers. Now, the transportation of dangerous goods is very highly regulated. There are very strict laws and regulations that govern the transportation of dangerous goods. So the question there that I'm asking you to think about is, why is this? Why do we have so many rules and regulations that regulate the transportation of dangerous goods? It's actually, this isn't a complicated law answer. This is actually a very common sense answer. Somebody going to try. Mr. Kambinda, why do you think there are, that if you transport dangerous goods, you have to have rules? There are specific procedures that have to be in place, that have to be followed.
I think is to make sure these goods are handled in a protected manner, in which they are not causing any damage to the environment and to people around. What?
Just give me a second. Okay, sorry, that was just quick emergency call that I got. You are absolutely 100% correct, Mr. Kambinda. Dangerous goods, by their very nature, they are dangerous. That's why they're called dangerous goods, which is why there has to be rules and procedures in place when you transport them, to minimize the danger, to minimize the risk, to try to avoid that there are incidents which can cause even loss of life, damage to the environment, etc., etc. So yes, Mr. Kambinda, thank you for that insight. Insightful but common sense. It's not a big legal reason, but it just makes sense. You cannot transport a fuel tank, a whole tank of petrol, just any old way, because something can go wrong and it can have catastrophic effects. So how are they regulated? How is the transportation of dangerous goods regulated? Internationally, we have the United Nations model regulations on the transportation of dangerous goods, shortly just known as the UN model regulations. The United Nations is not a lawmaking body. They cannot make laws, but what they did is they have, quite so many years ago already, compiled suggested regulations that vary, that companies can, not companies, countries can use to base their own laws on. Very detailed. I have the model regulations in hard copy in my office. You're talking about two A4 size books of about 500 pages each. Very, very, very detailed regulations. In some parts of what we study in this course that I'm teaching you, we will touch on the model regulations. But locally, within Namibia, the transportation of dangerous goods is regulated by the Road Traffic and Transportation Act, as well as the Road Traffic and Transport Regulations. We study the Namibian regulations in quite some detail. So another thinking cap question. I've just pointed it out to you. that there are these international, these United Nations model regulations on the transportation of dangerous goods, which are used worldwide, maybe with some variations, but in general, all countries in the world have their laws are based. Just give me a second quickly. Okay, sorry about that. It seems everybody suddenly needs my attention between 1 and 2. So what I was asking is, there are these international regulations that are basically followed worldwide. Our local road traffic and transportation regulations are based on the UN regulations. Why do you think it's important that the laws and regulations governing the transportation of dangerous goods are the same, or at least very similar internationally across the world? Why can't every country just make their own laws? Also a common sense question, not a fancy legal question. Mr. Kambina, are you going to try again?
Yeah, I'm here. Let me try. I think so that they can have a unique way of regulating these dangerous goods internationally, than having each country to have its own law how to regulate it.
Yes, yeah. Mr. Kambina, once again, you are showing the necessary insight that I appreciate in this course. The transportation of dangerous goods, by their very nature, is international. You have dangerous goods all over the world. So it's important that the laws must be standardized so that whatever country you find yourself in, if you see a particular symbol of a dangerous good, you will know, okay, this is what this is. I have to be careful around it. Just imagine in practicality the chaos it would give off if a fuel tanker is being filled with petrol, is being transported from Walfish Bay to Gaborone in Botswana. And when you want to cross the border from Namibia to Gaborone, you're suddenly told, oh, no, you're doing this all wrong. You have to change everything. It has to be done in another manner. It's just going to be impractical. It has to be standardized just to, because if something is dangerous in Namibia, it's also dangerous in Botswana and South Africa and Angola. So to standardize, to facilitate cross-border transportation of dangerous goods, to make it easier to transport these goods across borders. So this slide I have already explained to you. The UN model regulations contain detailed requirements. They provide a basic scheme to provide for the uniform development of national and international regularization and for worldwide harmonization to facilitate cross-border transportation. Now, the very first thing that the United Nations model regulations provide for is for the classification of dangerous goods. Dangerous goods, every single type of dangerous goods that you can possibly think of, is divided into 9 main classes. And each main class has got several subclasses. For every one of these classes, they have been allocated a number, and there is a unique symbol which identifies this particular class of dangerous goods. I haven't included the details in the PowerPoint slides. The details of the classes are in your study guide and in the notes. I'm sure you've seen these before. Keep your eyes open when you're traveling through town, whatever. These typically diamond-shaped signs, which indicates that this vehicle is transporting dangerous goods, and it identifies the type of dangerous goods, the class of dangerous goods. You need to, I will not ask you to draw the pictures. The one that you can see here, for example, in the middle row on the right-hand side with the skull and crossbones, that is the international, and these signs are the same in any place in the world. They are universally, internationally used. The one, the skull and crossbones there, for example, is toxic goods, poisonous goods. I will not ask you in an assessment what is the sign for poisonous goods and ask you to draw a little skull and crossbones. We are not artists. I'm not expecting you to draw them. I will give you the symbol and expect of you to identify the symbol. Tell me, what is this? What are the main qualities of this particular class of goods? And give me examples. Number one there, for example, looks like a picture of a bomb exploding. That's exactly what it is. Class number one, explosive goods. Qualities, literally simplified, it's something that can explode easily. So you don't have to use, this is not basic science. You don't have to use fancy words. And an example, dynamite. So you are expected to know all of that. That is in the notes. Then we move on to our actual Namibian RTTA regulations. Regulation 304 to Regulation 314. You need to know and have read and know these regulations. Obviously not off by heart, but this is essentially what the transportation of dangerous goods in Namibia is based on. Now, Regulation 304, the very first regulation, starts off like we've come across previously when we were looking at different sections or aspects of the RTTA. It starts off with regulations. Sorry, not focusing. It starts off with definitions. So The Act itself has definitions, we already know about that, but in the regulations, there are specific definitions that apply specifically to the transportation of dangerous goods. You need to know these definitions. They are important. First definition is the definition of a competent authority. Competent authority is defined simply as the authority which has been appointed by the Minister of Transport to ensure compliance with the regulations. And in Namibia, our competent authority is the Roads Authority. Be careful. In an assessment, I can ask you two different questions. I can ask you, what is a competent authority? There's your answer, the authority that's been appointed to ensure compliance with the regulations pertaining to transportation of dangerous goods. Or I can ask you, who is the competent authority? Well, your answer will be the Roads Authority. So make sure you have read your question carefully there. Next two definitions go hand in hand, namely the consignor and the consignee. The consignor is the person or company that offers the dangerous goods for transport. The consignee is the person to whom these dangerous goods are sent, who accepts the dangerous goods which have been transported. Both the consignor and the consignee have got different duties, which we will discuss at a later stage. So just remember to read carefully and distinguish between consignor and consignee. A dangerous goods inspector is a traffic officer or a road transport inspector who has been specifically trained to enforce regulations pertaining to dangerous goods. Based on this definition, there's a question that I can ask, namely, what are the requirements for a person to be appointed as a dangerous goods inspector? There are two requirements which appear from that regulation. Somebody tried to tell me quickly, but I'm not going to ask Mr. Kambinda again, because he's done a lot of work so far. Somebody else must get a chance to try. Look at that regulation in front of you. Read it and tell me, what are the requirements? Ms. Napala, if you want to be appointed as a dangerous goods inspector, what are the requirements? Mrs. Bungo, do you want to try?
Yes, Miss, I want to try.
Yes, please go ahead.
You have to be a well-trained police officer on dangerous goods.
Okay, you're almost correct. Do you want to elaborate a little bit? Not necessarily, Ms. Sibunga, not necessarily a police officer. No, all police officers are not, cannot, or any, not just any police officer can become a dangerous goods inspector. Narrow that down a little bit. There highlighted, but now you can't read it, but I've highlighted it for you. Mr. Sibongo, try again.
I said a traffic officer who's well trained on dangerous goods.
Okay, sorry, maybe I misheard you. I thought you said a police officer. A police officer, not all police officers are traffic officers. But otherwise you are correct. So specifically, so thank you for participating. Specifically, first requirement, you must be appointed as a traffic officer or a road transport inspector. Can be the one or the other. A traffic officer or a road transport inspector. And then secondly, you were quite correct there, who has been well trained specifically on the regulations and the transportation of dangerous goods. So first requirement, appointment as traffic officer or road transport inspector. Second requirement, training in on the enforcement of the regulations. Those are the requirements then for appointment as a dangerous goods inspector. Dangerous goods inspectors have specific duties and also very specific rights that we will look at also still in this unit. Exempt quantities. We're going to get back to exempt quantities. You already know, I've already pointed out to you that there are these detailed regulations pertaining to the transportation of dangerous goods. The driver must be trained, there must be placards on the vehicle, etc., etc. If, however, Mr. Sibungu, you look to me like somebody that might go to a farm over the weekend. You go to the farm over the weekend?
Sorry?
Who goes to the farm over the weekend? Do you go to the farm over the weekend, Mr. Sibungu? Or do you just stay in town?
My network is a bit cracking. I'm not getting you clearly.
Okay, never mind, it doesn't matter. I was asking who goes, I'm going to put it here in the chat box. A thumbs up quickly. Who goes to the farm on the weekends? I don't believe that there's nobody in this class that doesn't go to the farm on the weekend. Nobody got the family that's got a farm. Okay, anyway, let's get back. Dangerous goods must be, Mr. Sibungu, I thought you go sometimes. You look like someone that would go. Now, Mr. Sibungu, if you go, to the farm and you've got your Land Cruiser or whatever you drive loaded up, and amongst the stuff you are taking for the farm is a couple of jerry cans of petrol. Petrol is dangerous goods. But you can take those jerry cans of petrol to the farm without having to have a specific certificate of training and a big placard on your Hilux or everything. Exempt quantities. Exempt quantities, the exact volumes of exempt quantities are contained very, very much detail in the UN model regulations. We don't study those details, just need to know the concept of exempt quantity. The maximum amount of a particular dangerous goods that you may transport in your private vehicle, for example, without having to comply with the regulations. In winter, when it's cold, I have a gas heater that I use in my house. Every so often, my gas bottle gets empty. I go to Afrox or whatever, or to Pupkowitz to have my gas bottle filled, and I load it in the back of my car and I bring it home because it's an exempt quantity. Exempt quantity is a small amount of dangerous goods that you may transport for personal use without having to comply with the regulations. Get back to that again. An incident, remember what the definition of an incident? An incident is an unplanned event that takes place during the transportation or storage of dangerous goods, which can involve the leakage or spillage of, or the risk of leakage or spillage of dangerous goods. So an incident is anything unplanned that happens. Do not confuse an incident with an accident. Let me get back to my chat box here quickly. So you get an incident and you get an accident. These are not the same. An accident will be an incident in the sense that obviously it's unplanned. You don't plan to have an accident. So if you have an accident you're a dangerous goods driver, you're involved in an accident, that will be classified as an incident. But an incident is more than just an accident. Even getting a flat tire along the road, and you have to stop and you have to change the tire. That is an incident. There was no other cars involved. Your car isn't damaged. It wasn't an accident, but it was an unplanned event. It's delaying your journey. There are risks involved, having to stop and change the tire of your fuel tanker that you're driving. So an incident, an unplanned event that comes with the risk of leakage or spillage. A multi-load. What is a multi-load? That is when more than one type or hazard class is transported on the same vehicle. You probably haven't noticed. Have a look next time if you get close enough. Mr. Sabunga, when I was asking, not Mr. Sabunga, it was Mr. Kabinda that answered there. When I asked her, have you seen vehicles transporting dangerous goods? These tanker vehicles that you see often transport multi-loads, where they are transporting petrol and diesel at the same time. You won't see it if you're at a distance and you just drive past. If you're at a fuel station, a petrol station, and one of them is parked there, they're busy filling the tanks, the underground tanks, maybe walk closer and go and have a look. You'll see that the actual tank at the back is split in half to separate it into two compartments. And one is clearly labeled petrol and the other one is clearly labeled diesel. That is a multi-load. Multi-load when two or more of the same type or hazard class is transported on the same vehicle, two or more different types transported on the same vehicle. The TREM card, we're going to do the TREM card in more detail at a later stage, just so that you know. TREM card is a transport emergency card, which lists the hazards and vehicle emergency information for the goods being transported. The TREM card is if there was an incident and your first responders have to act. First thing they will do is they will find the TREM card, which will list the hazards of the particular goods being transported and important emergency information for them to use. For example, do not use water, etc., etc., etc. If it's a multi-load, for every particular type or class of goods being transported, will be a separate TREM card. So the TREM card information, emergency information about the particular class of goods. So the application of the Act and the regulations, when does the Road Traffic and Transportation Act apply? It states very clearly that no dangerous goods may be transported in any manner other than which as is specified in the regulations. It applies to all vehicles transporting dangerous goods that are registered in Namibia, wherever they find themselves. So a Namibian registered fuel tanker that is traveling through Botswana still has to apply to the Namibian regulations, as well as, of course, to the Botswana laws. It also applies to foreign vehicles wherever they are in Namibia. So a South African or Botswana or Angola registered vehicle has to comply with our laws when they are here. There are, however, certain exemptions. Sorry, I skipped a slide. We spoke about this earlier. There are certain exemptions from these regulations, instances where the regulations will not apply. The question was actually in your assignment. Regulations do not apply to dangerous goods required for the propulsion of the vehicle. My car uses petrol. I have a petrol tank, but I don't have to have a placard on my vehicle. Dangerous goods used for the propulsion of the vehicle. Dangerous goods required for the operation of specialized equipment. Sure, you've seen refrigeration trucks. See them regularly that transport goods that can be spoiled easily, that have to be kept cold. Refrigerators use gas. So there will be gas on that truck, but the drivers don't need special training. Dangerous goods required in accordance with operating regulations. So fire extinguishers forever, they are exempt from the regulations. And then your exempt quantities. This last bullet point there refers to the exempt quantities that we spoke about when we were looking at the definitions. Dangerous goods packaged for retail sale and carried by individuals for their personal use. Those four categories, the regulations do not apply. Then there is another instance, and don't confuse this slide, the exemptions, with this one where the regulations don't apply. The Road Traffic and Transportation Act provides that in certain instances, if a consignor or an operator is transporting dangerous goods, they can apply for an exemption from the dangerous goods for a particular trip, a particular consignment of dangerous goods. Application must be made to the Executive Director of the Ministry of Works and Transport, who will grant the exemption after consultation with the Roads Authority, the competent authority. It can then grant an exemption to all or any of the provisions of the regulations, subject to such conditions as I deemed necessary. The exemption must then be published in the Government Gazette and may be amended or cancelled subject to reasonable notice. Now, when, and I do not know of any single instance in Namibia where this act was actually used, but I could be wrong. When would somebody wanting to transport dangerous goods want to apply for an exemption? When you transport dangerous goods, and we'll get to that towards the end of this unit, but you've also already seen this, there are very obvious signs on the vehicle indicating that this vehicle is transporting dangerous goods and the particular type of dangerous goods with contact numbers, etc., etc. So it's very public. But it could be that making this public could actually make it more dangerous, specifically with the transportation of high consequence dangerous goods. High consequence dangerous goods are dangerous goods which are not just dangerous, but it come with an additional danger in the sense that they can be a risk for national and international safety should they end up in the wrong hands. So high consequence dangerous goods, we're thinking specifically of explosives or radioactive goods, which you would rather transport quietly to minimize the risk of being hijacked, etc., etc. And in these instances, if you want to then not apply to certain aspects of the regulations, you can apply for an exemption. So you get an exemption that your vehicle doesn't have to be placarded, etc., etc., etc. So to ensure, exemptions are granted to ensure the safety of dangerous goods being transported. Any questions?
Yeah. It was just an input on the one that you said incident and accident. They are different. Now in TTP, we learned that an incident is a risk, and then an accident is a hazard.
Okay, that is, what is PTP? What subject is PTP?
Transport policy and planning.
That's very interesting that they distinguish between risks and hazards. If my English is Englishing, a risk and a hazard is the same thing. Who's your lecturer for PTP? I'd like to get more information about this. Not saying they're wrong at all, but sometimes subjects, I teach you the legal definitions and they've got other definitions. And then we must make sure that we aren't confusing our students. Who's your lecturer for PTP?
That was for last semester. Yeah, last semester. That's Professor Ndumba.
Bandunga. And you said an
Ndumba,
incident
Ndumba
is a what?
is a risk,
Yeah, but you
and
said
an
just an
accident is
incident
a
is a
hazard.
risk, an accident is a hazard.
Yeah.
And PTP is transport policy.
Yes. TPP and planning.
Policy, and I'm just making a note here because this is interesting to me now, and I'm not going to respond to your question, but just also for my own information, I will get in touch with Professor Ndumba and just clarify what did he mean by that, so that if there is a contradiction or something, we can just make sure that we don't end up confusing our students. Thank you for, nobody else in all the other years that I've been teaching this has actually raised that issue to me. I'm going to get back to you on that. Okay, it's nearly 2 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining the class. Yes, have a wonderful week. I'll get back to marking to get your marks released to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.